Mortal Kombat X and Fallout 4. What do these titles have in common? Well, both are entries in various story franchises, and both made major changes in their core gameplay elements. So why is it one is well received and even loved to the point where people say it might be the best in the series, while the other seems more of a disappointment in a consistently great line of games? Today I'm going to take a look in depth at these entries and their respective franchises, and compare and contrast what was done well and what was done poorly by their developers. And by the end of this video, I hope to shed a new light on why change can be great for a franchise and why it can be terrible. The most important part of change is who is actually making the decisions. NetherRealm Studios is the development team behind Mortal Kombat. While individual pieces of NetherRealm Studios may have changed throughout the years, the visionary, the heart and soul of the studio has always been there. Ed Boon was part of the original team that created Mortal Kombat back in the early 90s. Since then, he has been over virtually every Mortal Kombat game, and I cannot stress how important it is to have a creative director that is consistent with every single game in a franchise. That's what causes a game to consistently be great and consistently bring back the things that fans truly love about it. That being said, Ed Boon also realized that there are things that need to be added into the game, things that need to be changed fundamentally over time in order to have people continue to come back and play the game. Because in the gaming industry, stagnation means death. Whether that stagnation means death of the entire franchise or death of just the single game, that's up to how long it stagnates. If it stagnates for multiple games in a series, like Call of Duty has been doing, then that can mean the death of the entire franchise. Die-hard fans will eventually lose all trust in the franchise. And once the die-hard fans lose all trust in you, it's over. Now let me go over what stagnation means. When I say stagnation, I don't mean keeping things kind of the same. I mean keeping things almost exactly the same. Not really going anywhere, just kind of staying in the same place. And that's a problem. That's what I mean by stagnation, where there's absolutely no type of innovation, no type of attempt to try to do something different. But that's enough about stagnation. Let's actually take a look at the history of Mortal Kombat now. There have been 10 main entries in the Mortal Kombat franchise so far, and in all 10 games in this series, something has changed majorly in every single one of them. Whether it be the introduction of babalities in Mortal Kombat 2, which allowed you to actually turn your opponent into a baby instead of killing them like the traditional fatality would, or animalities which were brought in during Mortal Kombat 3. Like it sounds, it allows you to turn to an animal and actually kill your opponent instead of the fatality or babality at the time. And then there's chess combat that was introduced in Mortal Kombat Deception. It actually allowed you to take control of players during chess and move them around strategically just like a chess game, but it incorporates the violence and brutality in Mortal Kombat by allowing you to kill the pieces that you would take. Then we have Mortal Kombat X. Mortal Kombat X introduced the variation system. I was a little iffy about it when I first saw it. I kind of saw it as splitting up one character into 3 just for the arbitrary benefit of saying we have 3 different kinds of this character. But upon playing the game and actually experiencing it, I can say that every character and their variation actually plays differently, and it doesn't simply feel like they just split it up just to do it. Now, this is very important to remember. When you change something, do not change it just to change it. Change it for an actual benefit. We'll get into the only Mortal Kombat game that was truly terrible in a second. For now, let's start talking about Fallout 4 and what it did differently than the previous Fallouts. Let's start out with the RPG elements. Now, compared to previous Fallouts, the RPG elements in this game were a little bit lax. An example of this would be the hard leveling cap that most RPGs usually have that forces your character to specialize. Fallout 4 decided to go with more of a soft cap, where you can level up to the very max level, but it gets harder and harder as you go. So theoretically it's possible, actually in practice it's kind of hard. But the very thought that you will allow the players to continually going and going and going without there ever being a hard cap to say you have to start over to get to experience more of the game, it kind of made the game lose its replay value in a sense. And it lost its replay value because players didn't have to pick and choose. They could just have it all if they really wanted to. Another problem was the actual choices in the game. Now, I'm not saying the choices in the game were bad or that they were just very linear. What I'm saying is when you compare them to the previous Fallouts, the choices were very linear. Now, once again, I'm not saying that they were linear by themselves. They actually had some very varied choices. But when you compare it to a game like New Vegas, which allowed you to go and save the man that tried to kill you at the beginning beginning of the game, in comparison, the choices in Fallout 4 really weren't that freeing. Not to make it seem like I'm just completely hating on Fallout 4, because I played it and I actually enjoyed it. It was just a bit of a disappointment to me. But to bring to light some of the positive things, the positive changes that the game had, the settlement system was very fun to use. While it was kind of empty at times because the settlers didn't really have that much of a personality, the system itself was extremely fun. Another great change they made was the actual gunplay in the game. Previous Fallouts kind of felt very clunky when it came to aiming the guns and shooting the guns. The actual first-person aspects were very stale, but in this game they put a very high focus on actually making it feel more like a first-person shooter, and that's not a bad thing. Not to mention the addition of voice lines for all male and female speaking parts in the game. Every single dialogue option had a voice line for the male or female player. That being said, that could also be a reason as to why the choices in the game were a bit more narrowed down than before, considering the amount of lines that the previous Fallouts had and the amount of lines that the voice actors would have to speak for this game. I'm not saying that that's exactly why, but I'm saying that it's a possibility. So why is it some of the changes in Fallout 4 were very disappointing to die-hard fans, while the changes in Mortal Kombat X were very pleasing to die-hard fans? It really comes down to this. You have to understand what your core competencies are. Now, you may be thinking right now, Big Stall, what are core competencies? Well, I'll tell you right now what they are. A core competency is a defining capability or advantage that distinguishes an enterprise from its competitors. Basically, what sets you apart from everyone else? What do you do that is better than everyone else? Now, for an example, for my basketball fans out there, Kawhi Leonard's defense would be his core competency. Chick-fil-A's service, their friendliness, all that, that's their core competency. That's what they do better than everyone else in their field. So what exactly is Fallout 4 and Mortal Kombat's core competencies? Well, for Mortal Kombat, it's pretty easy. The fatalities, the blood, the violence, those are its core competencies. Those are the things that really set it apart from other games out there, other fighting games more specifically. And I said I would come to this later, and it's around that time to talk about the truly terrible Mortal Kombat game, Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe. Now, Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe, the fighting aspects weren't that bad. It was actually enjoyable at the time, but what made it unbearable for me to play was the thing that I loved about Mortal Kombat. The thing that as a fan drew me to the game had been taken away. Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe was basically a PG-13 Mortal Kombat game. The blood was very minimum. There were no fatalities. Well, there were fatalities, but they didn't actually kill the person, so they weren't actually fatalities. And that's something that I really had a problem with, and other fans out there also had a problem with this. That's why the next Mortal Kombat game, Mortal Kombat 9, which they rebooted, hosted the tagline of "Fatality Lives," because they realized they had done something wrong. They had forsaken their core competencies, and once they had done that, they were just another Street Fighter or another Tekken. Not saying those are bad games, but once they had taken away the blood and the killing aspect of it, there was nothing that really set it apart from those games. It was just another fighting game at that point. Now, let's switch our attention over to Fallout. What exactly are Fallout's core competencies? Well, that's pretty easy. Role-playing, making choices, freedom, character building, and of course a story. The previous weak FPS elements, that could be forgiven because of all the core competencies were so great. Those things were so great you didn't really focus on the first-person shooting elements because of the role-playing elements. Fallout 4 kind of switched it around. They focused more on the first-person elements, adding new things into the world and the open world elements, but the core role-playing elements took a hit because of that. Well, I won't say because of that, but they took a hit while those other things were being improved. But there's always a silver lining. Like I said before, it takes a while before video game fans finally completely give up on you when you're stagnating. And even this Fallout, it didn't completely stagnate. It was trying new things, but it hurt its core competencies in the process of trying new things. And that's okay, it happens sometimes. As I said earlier, Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe abandoned its core competencies, and look how it bounced back 2 years later with Mortal Kombat 9. So to answer the question in the video's title, No. Change is not always a good thing. It varies depending on what you're changing. If you're changing something that is a core competency, something that the series is known for, something that made the series what it is now, there's a good chance that might not be a good thing. Now I say might because if you execute it perfectly, if you do it exactly right, you can still pull it off, but that's very hard to do. As you'll see, many games have tried to switch up their gameplay or done things differently over the years, and eventually the franchise dies because of it. You have to make sure you do it with extreme precision and with perfection, and it has to be led by someone who knows what they're doing, someone who loves the franchise, someone who's been with the franchise, someone who knows what's best for it and only wants the best for it. All that being said, when you pull off that change to the game, that major change like Assassin's Creed Origins did, it can be amazing. It'll breathe new life in your franchise and it can take your franchise to a whole new place. But that's it for me, guys. I really want to know, what do you think about changes in recent video game franchises? Do you think they're all good, all bad, or are you somewhat like me where you're in between with it? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content. I'm Big Stall, and I'll see you next time. Peace.